If there were a way for you to increase revenue without increasing operations cost, would you like to know how? I'm guaranteeing you, any business owner who hears you make a pitch like that is going to say yes. Good day. It's your host, Dino Santos, also one of the main moderators of Tip Talks, and it's season 2, episode 7. Now, you're probably wondering, where on earth are my analysts or co panelists? Well, it's because today marks a special edition. This is where we get our panelists to share some of their wisdom with you on speech writing or being a great speaker. And today you're in for a treat because for my turn, I'm going to talk about what it takes to get your listeners' attention within the first 10 seconds or within just even less than that, how to maintain it, and how to end powerfully. So let's get on with it. Once again, I'm Dino Santos, your moderator and the only analyst on the show for today. So let's begin. Well, like any great speech, it always begins with how our speaker or how you are able to get the attention of your listeners. So, of course, we start with what was the attention getter used? Well, there are quite a lot of them, but the most effective one appears to be a question. Because when you ask a question in the interest of your listeners, then you're bound to hook them quickly into what you want them to listen to. Like, especially if you phrased it this way. If there were a way for you to, whatever it is you'd like to say, would you like to know how? Like, for example, if there were a way for you to make people watch your show and subscribe, would you like to know how? Of course, when you phrase it that way, the answer is always going to be yes because when you say that, even in Tagalog, kung may paraan upang makuha mo yung atensyon ng mga tao at gusto nilang manood sa palabas mo, gusto mo bang malaman kung paano? You could shorten that however you want, especially when it comes to subject matter, but it's always going to be that way. Think of it like a burger. If there were a way is the top bun, and the bottom bun is would you like to know how, and your topic is the one in the middle. So let's try that again. If there were a way for you to increase revenue without increasing operations cost, would you like to know how? I'm guaranteeing you, any business owner who hears you make a pitch like that is going to say yes. So, what about the other attention getters? Well, here's another one. It's called a quotation, where a quotation has two benefits. Number one, it'll make you sound like you're prepared even when you're not. Why? Because the implication is you would have done your research, carefully curated or selected your attention getter just so that it'll work. And the key there is to pick an attention getter quotation that is not so or too popular. You choose a quotation that has uniqueness but not too unique that people won't recognize who the author could be. Like, for example, when I'm asked to teach about debate or how to judge a debate, I often quote Voltaire, like this dude in the painting next to me. Because I may start my talk this way. Voltaire once said, "The spoken word, no matter how contrary, preserves contact. It is silence which destroys." Welcome to this session today on debating skills. See how that works? So whether or not I'm actually prepared, but I start out that way, it's bound to get attention. Another one that I particularly like from Voltaire goes something like this. Voltaire once said, "I may not agree with what you are saying, but I will fight to the death for your right to say it." Welcome to this session on debating skills. See how that works? A quotation, really. is a great way to save your behind when you don't have a good attention getter prepared at the moment that you are asked to speak. So just remember the key point here. If you use a quotation, it's got to be something from somebody that everybody knows but isn't too popular. All right? Moving on. A startling statement. Well, a starting statement is like what it sounds. It's meant to shock people. It is so powerful that I'd like to call it the break glass in case of fire. Not to be used lightly. We use it provided that the audience we're using it on is liberal enough to accept your use of it, because otherwise they would think that you're either irreverent or politically incorrect. Let me give an example. This one I heard from a comedian, an actor, who a long time ago gave a seminar called Born Champion, and I just happened to be in the audience listening to it. So here's how Bernardo, once upon a time, got my attention when he said, You, 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 all of you, you're all born champions, and don't you forget it. You don't believe me? I'll prove it to you. During the first minute you're on this planet, during the first second you're on this planet, during the first microsecond you're on this planet, out of millions and millions and millions of sperms, you're the only one to get to the egg on time. So, that means you're a champion, and don't you forget it. Naturally, people in the audience bust out laughing because we weren't expecting him to do something like that. And yet, as fun as it was, he did prove a point, because yes, indeed, out of millions and millions and millions, we did get to the egg on time. I mean, we could have been flushed. But let me reiterate, using a startling statement carries with it enormous risk, because if the audience is conservative, you're likely to get in trouble. So use this with an audience that already knows and likes you, and an audience that happens to be liberal. Okay, moving along. Here's another good attention getter. Whoops. There it is. It's called painting a picture. Mean to say, just describe the benefits of your topic, because that reels people in really, really fast. Like, for example, what if your topic was all about the 5S? You could say, imagine, if you will, everything on your desk is neat and everything is where they should be. So when your boss walks into the room and says, Dino, do you know where the De La Cruz file happens to be? And then you say, Sir, may I please know the first name? Oh, that's Andrew. And so you go, yes, sir, I happen to know. And so you go to your filing cabinet, and with the D to G, you see De La Cruz, and because A for Andrew, you're able to find it in 5 seconds or less, making your boss impressed with you and your filing ability. You know, that kind of organization, that kind of reliability is possible if you take the 5S. So as you can see, just by describing the benefit of a topic, you can get your listeners' attention. And so I would strongly recommend you also consider painting a picture. Another one is, there you go, cracking a joke. Everybody likes a good joke, especially when it's short, and especially when it makes people laugh. But be careful, because if you decide to crack a joke, make sure that it's not necessarily poking fun at people who might react to it. Like, for example, I'm Visayan. So if I crack a joke like this, ladies and gentlemen, complete the statement with me. Where there is a will, everybody will say there is a way. But then you'll say wrong. Where there's a will, there is water. Di mo kay balo ana. Kay anam, that's where water is, in a will. Well, I'm not saying that it's okay to poke fun at Visayans, but it's okay to poke fun at yourself. People will forgive you, even your fellow Visayans. But if you poke fun at a different region, that's asking for trouble. So cracking a joke is often a great way to melt the ice. So, like for example, if you say, "Ladies and gentlemen, lend me your ears. I promise to return them later." And then you begin your talk. Hmm. So, cracking a joke often works when you have what we call the pause. So everybody knows that the punchline is coming, because if you don't pause, you just give your joke straight, one after the other, people will totally miss the punchline and therefore not get the joke. And here's the worst part. Please don't ever try to explain your joke. People will laugh at you, not your joke. So if they didn't get it, it's their fault, not yours. Moving along. We also need to consider, how do we support our thoughts, our ideas, our pitches? Well, we need evidence, and that's what we call forms of support. Like for example, you can also use a quotation as a form of support, because clearly when you're trying to validate what you are proposing, you have to mention that it's not just your idea, it's because someone else thinks it's a great idea. Okay? And that's why you use a quotation. Now, the best ones often will come from a quotation from one of your stakeholders. Let's say the company president was listening in on your pitch, and you just happen to recall that in the annual, annual report, in the message from the president, you found some lines where he mentioned about the importance of being aligned in terms of our mission and vision, as well as our behavior, right? All of our plans. And so when you say something like, "Ladies and gentlemen, I believe it is very important for us to do strategic planning, because those who fail to plan to fail. And as our president said, that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Planning guarantees at least a strong chance of success. So let us follow what our president said and plan and have our strategic planning." So you see, when you use a quotation, that is one nice way of supporting your point of view. So, for those of you who are aspiring to be great public speakers or great speech writers, just listen to and remember some of these key points. Here's another form of support. It's called exhibits. All right. Now, because when you have an exhibit, meaning something that they can touch, something that's tangible, something they can smell, they can feel, they can hear, they can see, then it's more likely that they'll believe it. Remember Thomas? Doubting Thomas wouldn't even believe until Christ himself let him touch his wounds. Well, you know what? A lot of stakeholders are like that. They tend to believe what they can see, what they can touch, what they can smell, the tangible things. Because not everybody is a seeing and hearing person. Other people are your touch person. Other people are your smell person. All right? So, what you do is, apart from showing data or say statistics that reveal trends from the last 5 years, it is often a good idea, if you have an object that helps to illustrate this, you bring it with you to the boardroom, lay it on the table, and let everybody have a chance to look it over or size it up. For example, if you're going to pitch, say, how much faster a new laptop is, and so you're proposing a new supplier for your office. Well, what better way to prove that apart from, say, they're cheaper, they're more reliable, and they have good after sales service, but to have last season's laptops and the proposed laptop side by side, and you could run a couple of tests and invite the audience to try it out so they'll see which one is indeed faster. And if the proposed laptop that you're trying to sell to the decision makers is faster, especially after you've already gone through what we call vetting. In other words, you had a bidding process, and so the laptops you're showing on the table come from the 3 winning bids, and you let the stakeholders decide which one of the 3 they like the most, and the majority always wins, of course, depending on how the CEO feels, because he has veto powers. But the point simply is that if they can see, touch, hear, then they will believe more. All right, so an exhibit is another great form of support. Another one would be your statistics, all right, because numbers talk. And believe me, there are so many mutants out there. Now, when I say mutants, I mean these are people who will look at an Excel spreadsheet with 50 lines or 100 lines of numbers on it, and surprise, surprise, you can barely read the spreadsheet, but their practiced eyes, especially if they're finance people or accountants, they instantly see the data they want. So they can look at this spreadsheet filled with all those numbers, and in less than 3 seconds know what it's saying. All right, so please, one other tip in relation to this particular form of support: if you decide to use it to prove your point in a presentation or in a pitch, don't try to explain everything from point 1, 2, 3. No. What you do is spend time talking about 3 very important things. Number 1, where we lost money. And be prepared to explain how that happened so that you can talk about how you can prevent it from happening again. More important than the numbers when you talk about statistics is the story behind the numbers. And that's what your stakeholders will want to hear. Followed by, where we saved a lot of money. They definitely will want to hear that, all right? And finally, where we are making money, because you're talking about best practices, and when you do, they'll definitely want to hear so that it can be replicated and shared with the other branches, the other stores, all right? So, once more, where we lost money, why that happened, how we can prevent it from happening again, where we saved money, how we did that, where we made money, and what's the story behind that so that we can keep making money. All right, so don't just use statistics for statistics' sake, and please, for God's sake, do not look at the screen. Talk to your audience, okay? That's why there's a monitor on your laptop, so you can look at the monitor and keep your eyes on the audience so that they can keep their eyes on the screen. Don't lose eye contact with them as you explain the numbers. And you know, it really helps if you use a highlighter to highlight those 3 points so they don't have to try to search through your spreadsheet trying to figure out what the heck you're talking about. All right? And incidentally, that's why there's a magnification button or function in PowerPoint. Moving along, you also have experiences, all right? So you can also talk about your experiences, and if it happened to you, that makes it even more powerful, because that means nobody can contradict you. Because if it happened to you, who else can say it didn't happen? I mean, no. But if it's a shared experience, make sure that the people who shared that experience with you have been vetted so that they will not disagree with you during your pitch. Make sure that you bring it up with them before the meeting so that when you do mention it, and you point to them, nobody will embarrass the heck out of you by disagreeing with your interpretation of that experience. Okay? So take it from me, an experience is a powerful form of support. Because if you say, for example, sir, I believe that we should shift from ICE or internal combustion engine vehicles for our executives and go with hybrids or EVs. Because when I bought my Toyota Corolla Cross, for example, it's a hybrid, it allowed me to sell off my two ICE vehicles. And not only did I save garage space and maintenance cost, guess what? I'm not color coded either, so I can go out any day of the week, thereby eliminating the need for an additional vehicle. Plus, more space in my garage, and in some cases, you go to a mall and they let you charge up because there are charging stations for those things. All right, so moving along. Of course, there is what we call the comparisons. All right, where there will be times when what you're explaining goes over people's heads, especially if they're not technical and what you're presenting is very technical. So you need to compare because they may not understand. And this is where metaphors come in. So, for example, if you're talking about computer speed, people may not get that because what would they know about, say, an iCore 7 versus an iCore 3? They probably wouldn't. If they're like most people, especially people with white hair like me, that you lose them right away. But if you say, for example, have you seen a Volkswagen Beetle? Does it go really, really fast? Chances are it doesn't it? Have you seen a Tesla, especially the Plaid? You know how it can put Ferraris and other exotic vehicles to shame. Well, tell you what, the iCore 3 is like your Volkswagen Beetle, but the iCore 7, especially the iCore 9, well, that's like your Tesla Plaid, all right? Because it can go really, really fast and help you do your jobs faster. So, if I were you, invest in hardware that has the iCore 9 or the iCore 7. So you try to avoid obsolescence longer and get your better bang for your buck. All right, so that's what a comparison is. And may I strongly suggest that whenever you make a pitch, have at least two of those. You know, it can't all be statistics. Match your statistics with any of the other forms of support that I'm talking about, like the exhibit, comparison, the experience. All right, so moving along, we also need to have some samples. All right, and if you see this picture, that's exactly why they give out free samples at a grocery, because they can make their claim about how good their products taste, but it's really your taste buds who will decide if they're telling the truth, right? So if you're telling your boss that, hey, we should invest in, say, solar panels so that we're more environmentally responsible and so that we can lower our operations cost down for our stores, well then, guess what? That's a sizable investment, and it won't pay back inside of a year. It'll take a while for the investment to pay off. So if your boss says, who else is doing this? Who else in our industry has done this? So you need to be able to mention examples, and the bigger the example, and especially if you can name them and mention how much they're saving, then they'll put more hair on your chest, or in other words, they'll put more power behind your words. So for example, if you say, hey, check out Schumar, their SM North and many of their stores, if you could just see it from drone height, almost the entire roof of their malls are covered by solar panels. This is helping them to save a ton of money on electricity. And that's why if you go to an SM mall, it's cooler versus to when you go to a Robinson's Mall, which is obviously trying to save on electricity, okay? Because it's not as cold. Go to Festival Mall, you know what I mean. So, given examples, especially if you can actually name them, makes it powerful. All right? Now, let's come to how do you end powerfully? Because, it's one thing to be able to catch people's attention quickly, and another thing to back it up with evidence. But wouldn't it be great if you could end your talk powerfully? Hmm. After all, OFWs don't clap when the plane takes off from the tarmac. They're not even clapping when it's flying through the air. They clap when it hits the ground at NAIA. Right? That means home at last. Well, your audience is exactly the same way. They will clap if you end powerfully because it lets them know, thank you. Your talk is over. All right. Now, I know some of you are saying, when will Dino be done? Okay. So let me get through with this. The first one, which is powerful as a way of ending, is what we call repeat with emphasis. Okay. This is where you end the way that you began. So, for example, if you started with, if there were a way for us to increase our sales without increasing our sales personnel, would you like to know how? And then during the talk, you prove how. Because you're talking about chatbots, you're talking about online selling, you're talking about AI and algorithms that help you transact faster with less people. So then you can end. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is how we can increase our revenue without increasing personnel cost. So you repeat with emphasis. They make great bookends, very symmetrical, very neat looking. Personally, it's one of my favorites. Another one is what we call a if you're in sales, you'll understand what I'm talking about. It's a specific call to action because there's no point in convincing people that something is a great idea to get. You may even say how much it is. You can even tell them where to buy it. But unless you tell them who to buy it from and how, they'll probably buy it from somebody else and somebody else will get the commission, not you. And so it's so important that when you have a call to action, make sure you're very specific. With the 5 W's, the who, what, where, when, why, the how much, and the how often. Okay, the 3H, 5 W's and the 3H. So that you leave no mystery. People know exactly what you want them to do. All right? So this is a great way to end a presentation. Here's another one. There you go. You can summarize. In other words, wrap things up in a way that lets them know that you're ending. And you can normally preface this by saying things like, so ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, right? Because no matter how tired the audience is, when they hear you say those words, they liven up. All right, he'll be done in 30 seconds or less. But here's the tip. Keep your word. If you say, to wrap things up, to end, to conclude, because they all mean the same thing, when you're summarizing, keep your word and end it. Otherwise, people will get upset. The worst thing you can say is, oh, by the way. In fact, the only person I know who gets away with that, well, he's no longer around, Steve Jobs, who kept saying, and one more thing. But hey, people let him get away with it because the one more thing he did mention was pretty neat, pretty cool. But for the rest of us mere mortals, well, okay, he was mortal too. But for the rest of us ordinary folks, we need to keep our word. So when you summarize, end. All right, end in 30 seconds. And then, of course, we have the short story. Emphasis on the word short. It can't be, for God's sake, it can't be longer than the speech itself. Otherwise, you couldn't call it short. And as much as possible, it has to be something that's connected with your talking points, your speech. In other words, it can't be just a short story for the sake of ending with a short story. And ideally, your short story should be funny, because a joke as a short story is always a great way to end. You make people leave the room laughing, they'll think about you, they'll remember you, and they may want to invite you again because, hey, he's a great speaker. There's a lot of great value in what he's saying, and he always ends with a joke which is connected to what he said. So we enjoy listening to him. So you weren't only effective, but you were also able to win new fans. All right. So here's an example of how you can end with a short story that's also funny and delivers a point. And the best short stories are the ones that are easy to follow because you talk about trees. When you say there was an engineer, a lawyer, and a doctor. And this is the time of the French Revolution. And so, if you happen to be part of the intellectuals, they caught you and off with your head, with the guillotine. And so there was a time that an engineer, a lawyer, and a doctor were caught, and then they faced the guillotine. And the executioner asked, "So how would you like to meet your end? Face up or face down?" And so the question was also, who'd like to go first? And the doctor said, "I will go first." Executioner was curious. "Why are you so eager to go first?" The doctor said, "Well, if I can extend the lives of these two people, then I would have been true to my oath as a doctor to do no harm. So let me go first." And so the executioner, greatly impressed with the doctor, let him go first. And he asked, "Face up or face down?" The doctor said, "I'm not afraid to meet my fate. I will face up." All right, so then the executioner yanks on the cord, but then the guillotine refuses to come down. So he yanks on it harder. 2 hands this time. It still refuses to come down. And so he says, "Well, according to our rules, if the blade doesn't come down after 2 tries, it must be divine intervention. And so we will allow this doctor to go free." And then everybody starts to clap and applaud and cheer. And the doctor walks off the platform scot-free. Now, of course, there are 2 left, the lawyer and the engineer. So the executioner said, "Who'd like to go next?" And the lawyer said, "I would." Executioner, really curious, says, "Why would you like to go next?" And then the lawyer said, "Because I believe in the order of things. And so rules-based order is always the best thing. So I'll go next. Face up too, because I don't want to jinx whatever the doctor did. It worked for him, it might work for me." And so he lay down. The executioner this time got a stool and jumped from it, holding on to the cord. Nothing happened. He did it again. Still nothing happened. And so the crowd stood up, clapped, cheered, and the lawyer walked off the stage free as a bird. Of course, now there's only just one person left, the engineer. And the engineer lay down, looked up at the guillotine, and then shouted at the executioner and said, "Wait, wait! I think I know what's wrong." Yeah, I know right now you're laughing if you got that joke. If you didn't get it, I am not going to try to explain it. No way. All right? So, the point of that story is this. In communications, there are times when it pays to be brutally honest And then there are times when it pays to be more diplomatic, to be more careful with what you say. So thank you so much for listening in on this short recording from Tip Talks. And I hope very much that it has helped you. And if you enjoyed this short instructional video, then do click on like, share, and subscribe. And if you like, please do leave a comment because we do like to give our viewers what they want. All right. Um, in a future episode, any one of our panelists can talk about another aspect of good speech writing or good speech making or delivery. And so, once more, I'm Dino Santos, one of the hosts, moderators, analysts of the show. And as ever, learning is a never ending journey with limitless vistas. Good day.